All right, my good ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys are doing well. This is just a quick video on the Suicide Squad. I will be putting up my spoiler review very soon. But first, before I get into what I'm going to talk about, I want to just send out an invitation to all people who are doers. I don't like people who are talkers. I don't like bystanders. I don't like people who they do nothing. They're all talk but no action. But for all the doers out there, there is a group that I'm going to post in the description below, which you can check out. This is only for the doers now, that you can check out and join if you're a doer. If you're not a doer, don't check out this group, okay? All right, so Suicide Squad. What I did was I went to the nearby mall where I live. I live in Trinidad, and in the mall there, I went and I started asking people about movies that they may want to see in the cinema, as well as what movies they watch and how they thought about it. And in so doing, I gathered some data on the Suicide Squad from 8 people who actually saw the movie. Now, the first set of people I went to were 4 people, and all of them really enjoyed the movie. They thought it was awesome. I asked them some questions to see how far they followed the movie, and it seems as though they didn't stay for the after credits scene, unfortunately for them. So they didn't know what that was happening. I didn't want to spoil it for them. So 4 people thought it was awesome there. Then I went on to ask 2 other people who had actually seen the movie, and they were going in to see a movie in the cinema. They had actually seen a couple movies in the cinema. I can't remember the name of it right now. Jason Bourne. They saw Jason Bourne. They saw also Tarzan, and now they were going to see another movie, and they had seen Suicide Squad. One of the gentlemen, he thought it was a good movie. It was okay, and the other guy, he thought it was pure shit. Okay. Now after that, I went on to talk to some other people who saw the movie. There were 2 young ladies. The first one, I came up to a group, again, it was young people. People who were working, but they were young people, 20-something years old. And one of them saw the Suicide Squad, and she thought it was an awesome movie. She thought it was cool. She went and saw it twice. But she thought that certain parts of the movie were kind of jarring how the editing was. It wasn't a lot of parts, but certain parts of the movie. Now after that, I went on to speak to another young lady who was working right in the mall there. And she also saw the Suicide Squad, as well as she saw Tarzan, as well as she saw some other movie that she stated. I think it was Jason Bourne, I think. I can't remember. But she also enjoyed the movie. And she was able to tell me a couple things about the movie, which I thought was interesting. And I was able to share a couple things with her about the movie that I thought was interesting. So we had a nice little rapport there. So at the end of the day, we're looking at 8 people. And out of 8 people, only 1 person out of those 8 people, and these are young people we're talking about, 1 person out of those 8 people actually thought it was pure rubbish. And then the other 7 thought it was good, or they thought it was awesome. So we had 5 people who thought it was awesome, and we had 2 people who thought it was good. And from this information, I wanted to share it with you guys so you would understand what the audience feels about this movie. Because I think the audience feelings about the movie is different to the critical reception of the movie. I think everybody can agree on that right now. Some people think that the critics have some merits behind what they're saying. But another thing I thought about was, what are the age ranges of the critics? This movie was actually designed for millennials, people that were 14 to 28, 29 years of age, if so much, right? And I noticed that the people who express interest in this movie are actually younger people. When you reach your 40s, when you reach even your mid-30s, you're not really interested in these kinds of movies, comic book movies, unless you're a comic book fan. I noticed that the people who were interested in these movies were people, in their mid-20s all the way down to 15, 14, 13 years of age. Those are the people who actually were fired up about this movie. And I looked at the available movies that were in the cinema. I noticed that the more grown and mature people, they wanted to go to the cinema with their families, so they would generally look at movies such as Disney movies, animations, right? So I thought that was interesting. I also noticed that the mid-30s people, they were not interested in surreal hyperrealism. They were more interested in more grounded films like Jason Bourne, etc. So I noticed that a certain age range, people kind of cut off from even watching movies. The only reason they would go to watch a movie is if it's a family time. But they had other things to deal with than movies. So I thought this was very interesting to give you and share with you guys this survey that I did. Some of the movies that people were interested in were like Bad Moms. They were interested in that. So you had the ladies. They have their ladies get together. Usually older ladies, younger ladies. And they like Bad Moms. They liked, some people went and saw Tarzan. But usually, again, people who saw Tarzan were actually more younger people. College students. We're talking like high school students, middle school students, right? When we look at the people who were interested in the movies such as, like movies on the lines of Zootopia, like The Secret Lives of Pets. Again, you're talking about much older people who would bring their little kids to go to a family meeting. In fact, I asked a couple who had a little baby, I asked them, if you didn't have a family, what movie you'd go see, and what movie you would see if you had to go with your family. And they gave two different answers. So you had the answer of, I would go and see Suicide Squad. This is a young couple. They're probably not even 20 yet. Maybe they were. Maybe very early in their 20s. And they were like, I would go and see Suicide Squad. Both of them agreed on that if they didn't have the family to go. But if it's a family thing, they would go see The Secret Lives of Pets or the other Walt Disney movie that's out there. I think it's called BFG. But you had the middle-aged people, like the 40-year-olds, the 30-year-olds. They would probably go and see Jason Bourne. So I heard people talking about Jason Bourne. Somebody even brought up the upcoming movie, which is Ben-Hur. So I thought it was very interesting, the kind of mix of movies that people would tend to want to see. Of course, some people don't go and watch movies at all, so we had that demographic as well. And we also had some people who they don't usually go and see movies, but on occasion they do it as a formality with their family, and they think it's, their family enjoy it, so they enjoy it, but they're not really movie people. So I talked to a couple people, and one gentleman, he was like, I'm more into sports, I'm more into football, I'm more into cricket, I'm more into the athletics right now, the Olympics that's going on. So, different people really may not have movies as a focal point of entertainment for them. So I thought this was an interesting survey that I did, and I just wanted to give you it in its completeness. I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, for those of you who enjoyed the Suicide Squad, please leave your comments below and like this video. For those of you who did not like the Suicide Squad movie, tell us why you personally. Don't tell me it's a bad movie. I just want to know why you personally, it didn't really vibe with you. What were your expectations? Probably sometimes when you expect one thing, maybe from the trailers, or maybe because you thought, this is a DC film, it's going to be dark and gritty like The Dark Knight, whatever it is. Give your explanation, because sometimes what happens is when you distance yourself sufficiently from that time period where you had that bad experience, because we as human beings, bad experiences come from emotions. So emotions you will always feel a certain way about a movie until you've distanced yourself from it for a while, and then you come back and see it and be like, hey, it wasn't that bad, or oh man, it really was terrible. So it depends. Time and distance will help you to really see a proper perspective on the movie going experience. For me, as I said to everybody, I thought Suicide Squad was wonderful. And I thought about the critics. The critics are not really young people. If you think about it, most of these critics are 30 plus years old, and they've seen a lot of movies. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that with all the hype and everything about Suicide Squad, that some of these people, it wasn't even geared towards them. It was geared to a certain age bracket of people to start with. And then the next thing I thought about was that critical reception of a movie, while it is something that is, that would be nice, doesn't really mean that these people who actually look at this movie because they've been watching a lot of films understand the movie. And I have realized, especially with the critics, a lot of them didn't even understand the movie they were watching. They didn't understand the premise of villain versus villain. And the best way I would try to explain this to critics is, do you remember the Predator versus Alien movie where you had two tremendous villains going at each other? I mean, I don't think Predator versus Alien ever happened, but or you have Chucky versus Freddy. Horror movies generally do villain versus villain. Well, it's kind of that kind of movie. That's what you saw with the Suicide Squad, except what I would call the main villain of the movie is not the person that the squad ended up coming together to fight. And I think these sort of paradigm shifts are what makes people not understand the movie. They've never seen a ensemble of villains fight other villains. They've never seen that. And I think that's the problem with this movie, is people don't understand it's a villain versus villain movie. It's not a hero versus villain movie. It's not a hero versus hero movie. Now, Zack Snyder, he did a hero versus hero movie, okay? In Batman v Superman. Now we had villain versus villain movie. And that's never really been done in the cinema the way and the extent to which the Suicide Squad was done. And I think because of those things, even when we hear the critics talk about incomplete story arcs or bad story arcs or bad motivations or not enough background information, or the characters they were not complete, I think they're thinking of it in the perspective of anti-heroes or heroes. The Suicide Squad is not about heroes. Not one of those characters there was heroic. Let me say that again. Not one of those characters in that movie was heroic. Diablo was not heroic. He was not heroic. Now listen to me carefully, because this is a paradigm shift. You may have empathized with Diablo, but first and foremost, Diablo got bad advice from Harley Quinn. He bonded with the team because he realized he shared the same characteristics as them. There was an ugly past and they had ugliness within. But Harley said, own it. Own the ugliness. That is part of you. Okay? That's not good advice, by the way, folks. But it really does help to bring the team together, and you are almost persuaded, unless you have a moral compass of some kind. If you don't, well, you're going to be in deep trouble. But you're almost persuaded by what Harley Quinn says because the way how she says it from her experience. And then the beautiful thing about that is that the team really bonds after that barroom experience, because they clash for a minute. And there is, of course, conflict between not just the team, but also the team and the military that's with the team. And General Flag particularly, because of his withholding of information and lying to the team. So, I mean, there's so much to this movie that meets the eye. The storyline is very, very simple, however. And I thought the brilliance of this movie was in combining a simple story plot with such complex characters. Very complex characters. I mean, the actors really pulled off. They did a hell of a job in this movie. And I don't want to go into that. That's for my spoiler talk. But I think the critics did not understand this movie. And they're used to a formulaic way of doing movies. They're not used to creative ways of doing things which don't have to follow the textbook way of setting up a character or setting up a scene or setting up some future event. So they say, oh, the movie seems haphazard because there's some flashbacks. And apparently these people are so ingrained in a certain way of storytelling, they are not flexible to understanding a storyteller telling a similar story, but people having great enjoyment in it. The next thing I want to say, movies were made to entertain. That was the purpose of movies. A good movie entertains. All right? A bad movie does not entertain. So, the judgment of a good movie must be looked for through entertainment value. A good film has to be. A bad film will not be entertaining. Will not be. Will not be entertaining. This is entertainment we're dealing with. So, if the critics can't get that this film is going to be entertaining and has been entertaining and that they got this film wrong, you cannot give this film 26% on Rotten Tomatoes. You may think you have a knowledge of filmmaking, but so many a filmmaker has broken those filmmaking rules. And I thought, again, that this film accomplished what it set out to do in telling the story that it was telling very easily. And I enjoyed it to the hilt, and I think a lot of people will enjoy the story. And the story is, the meat of the story is in the complexity of the characters in the story. So I think the critics completely missed this way of storytelling, and they were caught up in things that they thought were not according to textbook ways of telling stories. But stories can be told many different ways. And to tell me that this is a bad film, this is not a bad film. Far be it. There was a lot of hype around the film, but thanks to the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, some of that hype was taken away. When I went into the film to watch it, I didn't know what I was going to see. I didn't have any preconceived notions. I had no expectations of what I was going to see. I had seen the animation Assault on Arkham. I saw that movie, that animated movie. Some people say that Assault on Arkham was a better movie and a better storyline than Suicide Squad. I don't really see that. Actually, I think Suicide Squad sort of stayed true to a lot of the storytelling lines in Assault on Arkham, and very true to the Suicide Squad and how the squad would go out on different missions. And people would die, and some people would be replaced, and so on. So, I mean, I'm not a comic book fan. I'm now reading comic books. Batman v Superman got me reading comic books. But to say that Suicide Squad was a bad film, but a good comic book movie, is still giving it disservice. Because I thought that not only was the film entertaining, which is the purpose of having film anyway, but also on top of that, I thought structurally the storytelling was pretty sound. I thought it was pretty sound. I thought it pretty much accomplished what it needed to accomplish. And I thought, the movie had a lot of Easter eggs in it. That's beautiful. But I thought it was well laid out, compactly, and the speed at which the movie was moving along was one in which, yes, you were kind of breathless as you were moving through the movie, but it helped to carry that movie along, as this is a movie about villains. It had its own sort of personality, and I thought the film itself had a personality. I thought the criminals had a personality. I thought that the anti-hero had some personality, but it wasn't a lot of personality. But still, the anti-hero felt somewhat menacing. Okay, the anti-hero. The antagonist. I'm sorry about that. The antagonist felt very imposing in many respects. Okay, but the movie did move along at a fast pace. That is true. So I enjoyed it. Do I think that the other version, the version that Ayer was going to put out, a very explicit, very raw version, would have been as funny and as enjoyable as this version? No. I think this version was the best of the two versions and actually accomplished quite a lot. However, I do think that David Ayer's version, what people are calling David Ayer's version in inverted commas, first of all, because his version is really this final version here. I think his version that they're talking about, at least calling it his version, but I think I think this version is his version. I don't think there's going to be any other version. I think that, anyway, the version that they were talking about, which is much more gritty, grimy, and serious, I think it wouldn't have done as well. I think that this version, though I'm pretty sure he had humor in the other version. I think the kind of explicit nature of that version would have turned off a lot of people. And it is a PG-13 movie. So I thought that this movie did what it needed to do. I think that's why it did so well at the box office, because the marketing was good. However, I got to say, man, I think that they show too much in the trailers. I have to agree with everyone. You can't be showing all of that stuff in the trailers. I think if the trailers weren't shown, we would have been pleasantly surprised by a lot of things that happened in the movie. But, you know, it is what it is. So, did enjoy this movie a lot, and I just wanted to give you guys this information, what I thought about, you know, the critics and the audience response to this movie that I saw. And that's basically it, guys. You have a great one.